In this video we are going to talk about why China's economy won't collapse. Before continuing this video, like this video and subscribe to our channel for future updates. When the Winter Games are held in Beijing in the future, the city that hosted the Summer Games in 2008 will set a new record by becoming the first city in history to do so. At the Winter Olympics, there won't be any natural snow. But that won't be a problem for the Communist Party of China, since they will physically move mountains to get the job done. But President Xi Jinping faces a challenge that is significantly more difficult than regulating the weather. He must keep China's economy growing steadily while also fulfilling his promise of a more equitable distribution of the country's wealth. Since China became the 143rd member of the World Trade Organization, WTO, in 2001, discussions regarding the country's economy and growth model have always seemed to oscillate between a Panglossian view of unbridled success and the doomsayers' expectation that a crisis, signaling the end of Communist Party rule, is imminent. This has been the case ever since China joined the WTO. As China's real estate troubles have worsened over the course of the past year, examples of these extremes have been brought to light. For instance, Chanos has stated on multiple occasions that it's worse than you think, yet Ray Dalio has expressed optimism in China's business model. The truth is much more complicated, and the stakes are getting greater and higher all the time. It would be irresponsible to minimize China's achievements during the past 4 decades, during which it has climbed to become the world's second largest economy and the top trading partner of several countries. However, neither can it be assumed that Beijing will continue to offer the great economic performance that its residents have grown to anticipate, nor can it be assumed that foreign investors and governments would continue to rely on the growth that Beijing has been giving. Since the last time the Olympic flame burned in China's capital, when Xi was in charge of final preparations, he has oversaw significant economic and political changes that now threaten to undermine the key drivers behind China's success during the era of Deng Xiaoping's reform and opening up. Since that time, the Olympic flame has not burned in China's capital. In the previous 4 decades, betting against the Communist Party has been a game for fools, but China's economic model is currently being put to the test in its most severe form. The Communist Party, which Mao Zedong had organized to revolutionize China, went through its own profound transformation under Deng's leadership. Deng embraced the capitalist class with a pragmatism that can only be amazed at, both then and now, in contrast to the socialist bloc. This was done in order to allow the private sector to thrive. In their attempt to reconcile Marxism and materialism, Deng's 2 successors maintained Olympic-level standards of ideological gymnastics. In 2012, Xi, a crimson princeling produced from the elite of the Communist Party, ascended to the throne of China, bringing with him a legacy replete with traditions and contradictions. His father, Xi Jinping, fought alongside Mao to build the People's Republic of China, was exiled by Mao, then rehabilitated by Deng, and went on to play a pivotal part in Deng's reforms that opened up China to the outside world. However, in his approach to maintain the Communist Party's long-term legitimacy, his son has shown that he is more similar to Mao the strongman than he is to Deng the pragmatic. Instead of focusing on economic and pragmatic solutions, Xi prioritizes the nation's security and ideology in his pursuit of the China dream of national rejuvenation. And in a pivotal move that took place just a year ago, he added the objective of common prosperity, modernizing a Maoist concept from the 1950s in order to position the narrowing of income gaps, the growth of the middle class, and the promotion of entrepreneurial endeavors among China's smaller businesses as the central tenets of China's economic strategies. While eradicating income and wealth disparities is an admirable goal, President Xi Jinping's approach to accomplishing this goal has the unintended consequence of undermining 2 of the most essential driving forces behind China's growth model over the past 4 decades, private enterprise and the government's iterative, experiment-based approach to policy change. The only way the private sector is tolerated by Xi is if it is used to further the interests of the state. Xi only tolerates the private sector as long as it serves the interest of the state, and massive private enterprises too readily stray from that path. This is something that entrepreneurs like Jack Ma, founder of Alibaba, and others have dreaded for a long time. During the course of the past year, Xi has intensified his crackdown on large corporations in the private sector that he views as posing a risk to the Communist Party's monopoly on power. Xi views these corporations as a possible threat. His ideological goal is to strengthen Communist Party power in state-owned as well as strategically important private enterprises, and to subordinate business decisions to the requirements of the Communist Party. This goal is in line with his objective to strengthen Communist Party power in state-owned enterprises. Because of this, the incentives that drive innovative and entrepreneurial conduct in China have been negatively impacted as a result of his actions. The creation of room for small and medium-sized businesses, which account for 80% of urban employment, and the encouragement of getting rich through hard work and innovation are at the core of what China means when it refers to the concept of shared prosperity. The concept of common prosperity is ostensibly one that is favorable toward the private sector. Smaller private companies, which are frequently relegated to the status of second-class citizens in our society, ought to be supported in contrast to the problematic nature of huge private corporations. It is possible that Xi's ultimate goal is to create a private sector that is analogous to Germany's Mittelstand. The Mittelstand is comprised of a large number of small private firms that are innovative, create jobs with high salaries, and produce manufactured goods that are technologically advanced. To make such a transition, however, will prove to be quite difficult given that Xi's guiding principle is one of austerity coupled with redistribution. From the beginning of his tenure, Xi has singled out opulent lives and conspicuous spending as targets for criticism. Since the 8-point frugality rules came into force in 2012, the Communist Party's top anti-graft organization has punished close to 1 million officials for breaking the regulations. Why go to the trouble of becoming successful if your ability to spend the money you have worked so hard to obtain however you like will be frowned upon or taken away in order to fulfill the interests of the Communist Party? Very few people will make the effort to win the gold medal if they know they won't get the glory that ultimately belongs to them. Formulating policy through trial and error, also known as crossing the river by feeling the stones, is another one of the most effective components of China's model for economic development. Deng Xiaoping coined this expression. After widespread consensus has been reached regarding the goals of a specific reform, China's suck it and see method has allowed space for individual initiative and innovative thought. Before rolling out policies at the provincial level and then across the entire country, China was able to determine the optimal way to move forward by conducting local pilot projects, fostering innovation, and investigating solutions that were adapted to individual situations. Beijing can't afford to make any concessions on this component of its model of development if it wants to be successful in the future, when the environment will be more complicated than it is now, and when there will be greater unpredictability. However, a shift toward top-down directives has occurred as a result of Xi's efforts to consolidate authority and strengthen the state's grip on the economy. With a few narrow exceptions, it is unlikely that there will be any kind of testing conducted locally. As a consequence of rolling purges, there is currently a climate of political paranoia, and as a result, local officials are scared of pushing the edge, for fear that their competitors will use it as a justification to end their careers. In addition, Beijing believes that it does not have the luxury of time to continue with experimentation given the current state of the geopolitical conflict between China and the United States. The trial and error technique has been derailed as a result of a combination of factors, including the paralysis of local leaders caused by Xi's unrelenting anti-corruption campaign and aggressive measures by the United States to curb China's ascent. Welcome to a China that is more open to you. Read a preliminary Olympic motto for the year 2008. An important official made the claim in the year 2001, which was the same year that China joined the WTO, that the Olympics will also improve China and help construct a more just and peaceful society, a more democratic society, and help integrate China into the globe. The level of corporate transparency in China is significantly higher than in the United States. In the view of the Communist Party, all of those goals have been reached, and they continue to be met, as it employs alternative definitions of democracy and human rights that put the best gloss possible on China's authoritarian shift under a decade of Xi. Regarding a more hospitable West, China has reaped enormous benefits as a result of the West's decision to throw open the doors of its industrial and financial sectors to China in the belief that China's economy will eventually become entirely market-driven over the course of time. Many leaders in the West harbored the secret dream that one day China might evolve into a form of democracy that the West could acknowledge. However, Beijing had no intention of following the economic and political model that is prevalent in the West. She has raised China's head and made it very obvious that it will follow its own path, which is the result of Xi rejecting yet another of Deng's principles. The United States of America and other nations with similar perspectives have, at long last, come to terms with this truth. The international climate has become significantly more restrictive for China, which is detrimental to the country's prospects for growth. The motto for the Olympic Games in 2022 will be "Together for a Shared Future." Nevertheless, the diplomatic boycott led by the United States will bring to light the divergent political ideologies held by the world's two most powerful nations. The choreography will be perfect to demonstrate the superiority of Chinese communism, both for the Winter Games and for the National Congress this autumn, when Xi will most certainly extend his rule. Both events will take place in China. Now a proud centenarian, he leads the Communist Party, which appears to still enjoy strong public support as it works to improve the lives of ordinary Chinese people. But as Beijing moves further along the road to socialism and eventually, in theory, to communism under the deeply ideological slogan of common prosperity, it could very well begin to squander the tremendous economic gains it has made during the past 40 years with a more pragmatic, experimental, and open approach to development. This could be the case if Beijing takes a more open-minded approach to economic growth. The Communist Party's continued existence may be put in jeopardy by the current state of the economy, but in the past, it has been able to recover from the verge of extinction. Nearly 40 years ago, China began to implement economic reforms and trade liberalization, but not before maintaining policies that kept the country's economy mostly undeveloped, stagnant, centralized, and ineffective. China has been one of the world's fastest-growing economies since opening up to foreign trade and investment and enacting free market reforms in 1979. Through 2018, real annual gross domestic product (GDP) growth averaged 9.5%, which the World Bank referred to as the fastest sustained expansion by a major economy in history. As a result of this prosperity, China has been able to quadruple its GDP on average every 8 years and lift an estimated 800 million people out of poverty. China has overtaken the rest of the world as the producer, trader, and owner of foreign exchange reserves on a purchasing power parity basis. China is now one of the United States' main trading partners as a result of this. The third largest market for American exports, the largest source of imports, and the greatest partner in terms of trade in goods are all China. China is also the biggest foreign holder of U.S. Treasury bonds, which aid in funding the national debt and lower interest rates in the United States. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, forecasts that real GDP growth in China would decline to 5.5% by 2024 from 14.2% in 2007 to 6.6% in 2018, as the country's economy has matured. The Chinese government has accepted slower economic development, referring to it as the new normal, and acknowledged the need for China to adopt a new growth model that depends more on private consumption, services, and innovation to spur economic growth rather than fixed investment and exports. These changes are necessary for China to avoid falling into the middle-income trap, which occurs when nations reach a given economic level but then see their rates of economic development dramatically decline because they are unable to adopt new sources of economic growth, like innovation. Through a number of high-profile initiatives, including Made in China 2025, a plan to upgrade and modernize China's manufacturing in 10 key sectors with significant government assistance in order to make China a major player globally in these sectors, the Chinese government has made innovation a top priority in its economic planning. However, these actions have increased worries that China wants to employ industrial policies to lessen its reliance on foreign technology, even by barring international companies from operating there, and eventually control the world market. China's intellectual property and innovation policies were the subject of a Section 301 inquiry by the Trump administration in 2017, which was found to be detrimental to American economic interests. It then imposed tariffs on $250 billion worth of imports from China by 25%, while China increased tariffs on $110 billion worth of imports from the United States, varying from 5% to 25%. Such actions significantly reduced bilateral trade in 2019. On May 10, 2019, President Trump declared he was thinking about hiking tariffs on almost all of the remaining Chinese goods. The Chinese economy may suffer if there is a protracted and rising trade war between the United States and China. Congress is very interested in China's expanding global economic dominance and the economic and trade policies it upholds because they have important repercussions for the United States. Despite being a sizable and expanding market for American businesses, China's unfinished transition to a free market economy has led to economic measures that are viewed detrimental to American interests, such as industrial regulations and the piracy of American intellectual property. China has had a phenomenal ascent over the past 40 years, going from a poor developing nation to a major economic force. China's real gross domestic product, GDP, increased at an average yearly pace of roughly 10% from 1979, when economic reforms started, to 2017. China has enjoyed the fastest sustained expansion by a major economy in history and has lifted more than 800 million people out of poverty, according to the World Bank. 2. China has grown to be a significant economic force worldwide. For instance, it tops the list in terms of economic size on a purchasing power parity (PPP) basis, manufacturing with added value, merchandise trade, and reserve holder. The volume of bilateral trade between China and the United States has significantly increased as a result of China's rapid economic development. The entire value of trade between the two nations increased from $5 billion in 1980 to $660 billion in 2018, according to U.S. trade figures. The third biggest export market, the largest source of imports, and the largest trading partner for goods in the United States at the moment is China. In order to capitalize on the burgeoning Chinese market and reduced labor costs for manufacturing products for export, several American businesses have sizable operations in China. 3. These operations have given some American businesses assistance in maintaining their competitiveness abroad and have given American consumers access to a wide range of affordable goods. The federal government has been able to finance its budget deficits thanks to China's sizable purchases of U.S. Treasury securities, which as of April 2019 totaled $1.1 trillion. This helps keep U.S. interest rates relatively low. China is taking on more responsibility for global economic initiatives and policies, particularly infrastructure development, as a result of its growing economic dominance. A comprehensive plan by China to finance infrastructure across Asia, Europe, Africa, and beyond is the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. China's economic ambitions, if successful, may considerably widen its export and investment markets and boost its soft power internationally. China's leadership now has more faith in its economic model as a result of the country's tremendous economic growth and emergence as a significant economic force. According to many, the United States' biggest challenges lie in persuading China that it has an interest in maintaining the international trading system, which has played a significant role in its economic rise. And 2. Further economic and trade reforms are the most reliable way for China to expand and modernize its economy. China's competition would expand, consumer costs would go down, economic efficiency would rise, and innovation would be encouraged by lowering trade and investment restrictions. Many U.S. stakeholders, however, are worried that China's initiatives to promote the development of domestic innovation and technology could lead to increased state intervention, such as subsidies, trade and investment barriers, and discriminatory policies, which could have a negative impact on U.S. firms with a high IP concentration. Different people have different ideas about how to approach China in relation to important economic challenges. Some are in favor of engaging China through a variety of platforms. Some advocate an approach that combines dialogue where possible with a more active use of the WTO dispute resolution processes to deal with China's unfair trade practices. 111 others who view China as a growing threat to the American economy and the international trading system support a strategy of trying to restrain China's economic power and using punitive measures, like higher tariffs under Section 301, to either mitigate the harm caused by China's industrial policies to American businesses or pressure China to change unfair and discriminatory practices, such as the Made in China 2025 initiative. Some see responding to China's BRI as a significant threat to U.S. global economic interests. However, U.S. policymakers are concerned that China will use the BRI to primarily benefit its own firms, that the project implementation process won't be transparent, that BRI participation could leave countries with sizable debts, and that China will use the BRI to export its economic system to other nations. What do you think about this video? Do let us know in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear from us again, Be sure to hit that subscribe button before you go.